with that, thank you. So we are going to get started with creating impact, taking action for SDG 5 in your community. First of all, an overview of what we will be talking about. So first of all, I'll be introducing myself and talking to you a little bit about Mun Impact. For our second section, I'm going to talk about information and education and how you can educate yourself and others around you around the topic of gender equality and SDG 5. In our third section, I'll talk about how you can act for SDG 5, how you can take that theory, that information, and turn it to practice and actually take action for SDG 5. And then I'm going to talk about a little bit of the nuts and bolts of advocating and how you can be a good advocate for gender equality. So for starters, we have a quote by Malala Yousafzai that says, "We cannot succeed when half of us are held back." Empowering women is fundamental to, solving other global challenges and to creating a good society, a society that's fair, a society where everyone has access to food, water, education, because women are a lot of times those who raise our future leaders, our future adults, and a lot of issues require cultural shifts, and education is, as I'll talk about in a minute, a huge component of fighting prejudice and fighting other types of prejudice that are in gender inequality, and of creating human beings that care about the people around them and act for the SDGs and justice. And for that reason, and we cannot succeed as a society if half of us women are held back by prejudice and cannot access education, leadership positions, etc. I hope that makes at least a little bit of sense. So for starters, I'm going to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Rita Araújo. I'm 17 and I'm from Portugal. Sorry, my mic wasn't working. And I am the co-lead for Global Week of Action on SDG 5. I'm also the co-DSG for the Europe region in Munich Global's high school outreach program. I am a lead for Community Magazine for Munich Global, and I am a languages and humanities secondary school student. I've been involved in the MUN community since February 2021, so for exactly a year from when I participated in my first Omen debate, and for the first time got involved with the Mun Impact community as well. And I'm also a youth parliament enthusiast, and I consider myself to be an SDG advocate, a very imperfect one, one that maybe should be doing a little bit more, but an SDG advocate regardless. So now we are going to talk a little bit about Mun Impact. So founded in 2017, Mun Impact is an international nonprofit organization that acts mostly in a virtual space, but that's based in the USA, whose mission is to promote global citizenship, education, and SDG awareness and action through the Model UN community and leveraging the power of youth. In the last year, we have engaged and served over 25,000 students from all over the world. As you can see, we have people from all over the world in the session. And we host a myriad of free programs and events, from online Model United Nations, the first completely online and free MUN program, which has been running for over a decade, to our virtual global summits, where thousands of students from all four corners of the world learn about SDGs, MUN, human rights, and a lot more from experts on the field and fellow students who have been taking action for those fields. So now I'm going to go into the actual workshop, and if you have any questions, rest assured, we will have time for that at the end of the session, and you can always drop them in the chat and I'll try to keep up with that. So we are going to talk a little bit about the importance of information and education to combat gender inequality and how you can use that to advocate for SDG 5. So why is educating and informing fundamental to advocate and to advance SDG 5. So first of all, information is power. People who are informed, people who are knowledgeable about a certain topic, they have a lot of power when it comes to advocating and to talking about that and to spreading the information. For example, when we know, and I'm going to give a more practical example, when we know about which kind of food is healthy for us, like that's probably a terrible example, but we have the power to decide if we're going to eat healthy and if we yes and elongate our life or our healthy lifespan, and in that sense information is power. When we have the information, we can decide to do what's best for us and for our planet. And information helps undo biases and breaks stereotypes, so that's also another reason why information is fundamental, and especially when it comes to gender inequality. A lot of times people think that some of the reasons why women are discriminated against are biological, when a lot of times they aren't. For instance, I think there was at least a time a while back, like some decades back, in some places and some people, I'm not saying this is everyone, thought that women were like biologically worse or had a biological predisposition to not be as interested in science as men were, when in fact that might not be true. We have found out recently that recently and not so recently probably, that women just are raised to and learn science in a way that demotivates them from participating in that field. And the next point is information strengthens your arguments when advocating for gender equality. You need to know what you're advocating for and what you're advocating against. So when people bring these types of, terrible arguments why gender equality shouldn't be a thing, or if they think that it is already a thing, because a lot of people think that we have already reached gender equality, which is not true. You can always use your arguments against that. And lastly, education shapes us as people and helps us create our identity and build our value systems, as I was saying earlier. So educating people to know about gender inequality, know why it exists, know the facts and figures, it helps people grow up. And some people who are learning about gender inequality are adults, but it helps them grow up or form a vision of the world that is shaped by this idea that we should all be equal. So now I'm going to, and I hope this works, I'm going to stop screen sharing for a while, and I'm going to screen share again because I need to change to Mentimeter, but I'm going to open Mentimeter, and I'm going to ask that you guys open the website that I'm dropping in the chat. And I want you to participate in a word cloud. And I have the code right here. Just let me screen share this. And I want you to participate in a word cloud where we talk about what steps should we take to make sure we are working with reliable information. And hopefully you'll be able to write more than a couple of words. So I don't know if you can see the code, but it is 83355397. And yes, I'm looking forward for you telling me what steps you take when you're researching and maybe doing schoolwork to make sure you are working with reliable information. And please let me know if the link isn't working and the Mentimeter isn't working. Okay, so checking correct sources. Yes, you need to check your sources, make sure they are reliable, make sure they're sources you can trust, and we are going to talk about sources in a bit. Accuracy, yes, you need to strive to be as accurate as possible. I'm really sorry that that you seem to only be able to add a word at a time, but you can add it all together like this participant did with checking correct sources if you want to. Creator, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that, but you can type that in the chat if you want to explain. And I'm going to give it another minute in case some of you want to participate. I can. Okay, so this seems to have been recent to be done authority. Yes, make sure you can kind of oftentimes okay, so more people analyze. Yes, analyze the information you have been given, think critically about it. We also have authority. So information coming from authorities is more often than not correct. So those are some good sources to trust. Check, yes, check for primary sources. I love that. Primary, and I didn't even think about that. So in case you don't know, primary sources are sources that come, right from the source. Yeah, yeah. There are sources that are, for instance, a woman who talks about her experience suffering from gender inequality. That's a primary source. It's a source that comes from a person who's living an issue and who creates a document about it. So yes, I like that. Accuracy, recent information. Yes, look for recent information. Don't work with data from 1997 because that's probably not going to be accurate right now. And I'm going to close the Mentimeter and go back to the presentation. Okay, yes, and now I'm going to talk about the things that I wrote and that I considered, and yes, so don't trust everything you read, especially on social media. Right now, a very popular way of disseminating information, especially when it comes to advocacy and all of that, is to do it through infographics on Instagram. That's not always the best way to inform yourself about issues related to gender inequality and other issues, because there's very little accountability when it comes to that. Often no sources are cited or information can be kind of manipulated. So while those are very pretty infographics, I'm not going to lie, maybe don't trust everything you read there. Take it with a grain of salt. Be careful about what you share. Make sure it is accurate. Spreading misinformation is not great when it comes to advocacy. So please make sure the information is correct. When reading an article news article, yeah, this is mainly about mainly about news and blog articles. Ask yourself, how many sources are cited? Because often when there's more sources, not necessarily, but see if there are sources. Are these sources reliable? Is there a clearly identified offer? And this doesn't mean that this is take everything I say with a grain of salt, because oftentimes when information comes from an institution rather than a blog or something like that, there's not a clearly identified offer, obviously, because it comes from an institution. But think when you're reading a news article, if this was in a newspaper, it would have an offer, but is there an offer online, or is it just from a blog and there's no information as who the author of the article was? Yes, so food for thought there. Trust government. When you're looking at websites, if they are .gov or .edu, they're more often than not more reliable than .org websites, which are often also very reliable, which are more reliable than .com sites. This is also something you should take with a grain of salt, because it doesn't always apply. So please keep that in mind. When reading a scientific study, ask yourself, how was this study conducted? Who was a part of the study? How many people were a part of the study? This is all information that you often find in a section that's called methods. Read that, because not all studies are good studies, and we need to make sure that the studies that we are using and we are citing when we talk about gender equality and inequality, we need to make sure that they are studies that include women from different backgrounds, from different age groups, lots of women. So, you know, if we do a study like 1 in every 5 women hate the color yellow, if we are analyzing a group of 5 women, that's not a very accurate sample of people. That's not a very big sample. So try to see if we have a big sample, a medium sample, a small sample, and, you know, think critically about the studies as well. Look at the organizations like the UN Women, and other well-established international bodies and organizations for data. The SDG dashboard platform, that I believe it's divided by country, is a good example of a place where you can get numbers on SDG 5 that are often very reliable because they come from countries' SDG reports. And lastly, just think critically in general. If there's something you should take from this presentation, is to think critically when getting information, when acting, and when advocating. So next slide. So Mun Impact has this amazing resource called Storymaps, where young people can learn about the Sustainable Development Goals. And we have 2 story maps for SDG 5, and I want to show the platform to you. And I'm going to drop this link in the chat as well. So I'm going to stop quick screen sharing for a second. Okay, so story maps is basically these very interesting kind of articles, not really articles. They are, how do I explain this? I'm just going to show you because it's very hard to explain, but they like give you very straightforward and condensed information about the Sustainable Development Goals. You can and specific targets, by the way. You can click here, SDG Target Storymaps, and there's one about just SDGs in general. You can take quizzes, you can take action, and yes, we have one here that's featured about gender inequality, because if you don't know, this month's monthly theme at Mun Impact is gender equality. So yeah, as you can see here, there are multiple carousels with multiple themes surrounding SDG Target 5.1. We have introduction about the issue, the United Nations and UN Women. You can learn about advancing gender equality, the Convention on the Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, or CEDAW. Yeah, so you can, as you can see, there's a lot of interesting information about SDG 5 here. They are put together by a team of students in Mun Impact, and we all make sure that the sources that we use inside are quality sources. They are then reviewed by the adult leads within the program. So I encourage you to use story maps to your advantage when you're researching about SDG 5 and other SDGs. So third section, ACT, the importance of information and education. Okay, yeah, that was a typo, but ACT. So first of all, you can take small actions, and if you've been to the 100 Canadians information session at the beginning of the week of action, you know about this, but we have a program within Mun Impact called the 100 Canadians Challenge, and they have a toolkit with several actions you can take for the Sustainable Development Goals that you can later register in our platform, so they can be used to raise awareness and to show the world and that youth and people from all over the world care about the SDGs and are trying to take 100,000 actions for the Sustainable Development Goals. And you can find all about this in 100kleads.org, but we have a toolkit, which I will not open right now for the sake of time, but that I will drop in the chat later, where you have example these like small actions you can take for SDG 5 and for all the other SDGs, by the way, and this is translated into several languages, so you can go into the site and look for it in your language if you prefer that. But yes, the premise of 100K leads is that small actions can equal big impact if a lot of people take small actions. So I definitely encourage you to take a look at that. So next up, Girl Up. I'm going to talk about Girl Up, which is another UN adjacent related organization you can take part on and engage with to promote gender equality. So Girl Up was created in 2010 by the UN Foundation, and it is an organization that supports gender equality through promoting leadership development amongst girls from all over the world, raising funds for UN agencies who work to promote gender equality, training people to advocate for gender equality, and so much more. And you can get involved with them by creating or joining a Girl Up club, which are these clubs that sometimes happen in schools, sometimes are, you know, just regional, and where in clubs, I believe I'm not a part of a Girl Up club. I've never founded one, so I'm just speaking from what I read. And if any of you has experience with Girl Up, please drop in the chat. What I believe these clubs do is they promote several activities. Every month there's a different kind of activity they need to promote, and those activities are all centered around promoting gender equality. So sometimes they have to do with advocacy, sometimes with fundraising, sometimes with direct action. And yes, so creating or joining a Girl Up club is a good way to get involved with SDG 5. They also have a community platform where people can register even if they don't have a Girl Up club, to stay engaged with their events, to take part in forums, to keep up to date with community news. And I've registered for that. I think it's an interesting platform, and I definitely encourage you to take a look at that, and I'll drop the link in the chat later. You can join their events. That they actually have a very interesting event coming up that I want to share with you. They have an event about women in STEM, where girls can learn about how they can, you know, they can join a career in the STEM field and apply for a project award, and that's coming up. So I definitely encourage you to check that out. And among other things that they also promote, just for the sake of time, it's not, I sum it up to these 3 things. But there are other ways you can act for SDG 5 that are, you know, that I don't want to go that much into detail as much as other things I've talked about before, but you can join or create a gender equality club at school. That doesn't necessarily have to be linked with Girl Up. You can donate to organizations that support gender equality. You can advocate, and I'll talk more about that later. You can support female-led businesses and organizations in your community. You can stay up to date with news related to this topic. You can host or participate in an edit-a-thon. And an edit-a-thon is basically, so Wikipedia, there's like a deficit. Like if you see the profiles for men and the profiles for women, there's way more profiles on Wikipedia pages, not profiles, pages about men than about women who have been important contributors to our history and society. And sometimes to kind of mend this gap and to kind of help develop the profiles of women and other marginalized communities that aren't as represented in Wikipedia and then other communities. There are edit-a-thons where people just come together, and they're sometimes organized by museums. They are sometimes, I believe, organized by Wikipedia in association with some organizations. And basically you can host to edit a woman's profile on Wikipedia and make it more developed and actually reflect the actions that women took to help our society and world and to advance their fields. So basically there's that. Oh, thank you, Gunnar. I just saw you are dropping the links in the chat. And once again, there's a Mentimeter that hopefully will work better this time. And I'm going to drop the link in the chat. It's again menti.com. And what I want to know is what actions are you taking for SDG 5 in your community, or which actions would you take for SDG 5 in your community, if you could. And yes, so I can hear all of your wonderful ideas and we can talk about them for a little bit. What other? Okay, I'm just going to make sure that you can submit more than one word before I share the screen, because yes, last time that seemed to be an issue. Okay, I don't think I'll be able to, but just do as you did last time and hope and write the word all together. So the code, if you can see, is 529 529 887 48. And I look forward to hearing your ideas and your experiences. Feel free to drop the ideas in like well-being in school, have organized workshops. Oh, you seem to be able to type more than one word after all. So have organized workshops. Yes, organizing workshops is a great way of educating those around you about SDG 5 and gender equality. I mean, we're in Global Week of Action for SDG 5, so obviously here we believe that informing people and sharing experiences is a great way to act for SDG 5. Promote well-being in schools, speak to younger people. Yes, that also plays into the education component. Create awareness campaigns. Same goes there. You can create posters, you can create social media content, and we will talk a little bit more about that later on in this workshop. Create little books with info. I love the creativity. Yes, definitely. That also plays into the awareness campaigns via social media. Yes, and we will talk more about that later. Support charities. Promote gender equality in school, promote girls sports. Absolutely, supporting women's sports is a great way to kind of stop the gender pay gap in sports. And I'm going to give you another minute in case someone else wants to drop something. Okay, it seems like everyone contributed already, and I'm going to go back to our slides. Sorry for the kind of rough transitions. Okay, so I have something that I want to add here. So gender inequality is a very nuanced issue that has many intersections, and the way it affects people changes from community to community. And I think the best way for everyone to act for SDG 5 in their community is to listen to those who are impacted by the issue the most, listen to people who have been advocating and trying to advance gender equality in their countries for many years probably, and in their communities. And try to understand how your community is impacted and what you can do to help. It is a very nuanced issue, as I said, and we need to take everything with a grain of salt and with subjectivity. And yes, I think being a good listener is a very big part of being an advocate and working towards an issue like gender inequality. Okay, so next up, advocate. So now I'm going to go a little bit into the nuts and bolts of how you can advocate for gender equality and do that correctly and with quality. So how can you advocate for SDG 5? First of all, speak up, use your voice. If you see injustice happen, speak up for that. If you see women suffering from gender inequality, find ways to speak up and to share that with the world, with the people who have power to solve those issues and to, you know, expose these situations, because a lot of times what is needed is accountability. And when we speak up, we can create accountability for people who are, you know, partaking, unfortunately, in gender inequality. You can also amplify the voices of women and gender equality activists. This is very important. If you're a man and if you're a woman as well, sometimes it is very important to, and I'll talk about that later. I feel like I've said that 100 times in this presentation. It is very important to know when to speak up for your like by yourself, and when to amplify the voices of people who are affected by gender inequality in different ways than we are. So I think that we must, you know, amplify the voices of other women and gender equality activists 100%. So you can also sign and create petitions if you're old enough to do that. I think different platforms require different ages to sign and create petitions. Some of them let 16-year-olds do it, some of them you need to be 18. So definitely do that. Contact your representatives and stakeholders. I know this is actually very common in countries like the USA, but not so much outside of these countries. But your representatives, the stakeholders in this conversation, NGOs, NPOs, and you know, international organizations, they have emails for a reason. You can contact your representatives if you feel like you're not doing enough to mend the gender pay gap or to support gender equality, and you can just email them and share your thoughts, be respectful, and tell them, hey, I care about this, you represent me, and you know, I think you should pay more attention to this issue. And if there's a particular bill that is going to be voted for gender equality, you can encourage them to vote in favor. And yes, definitely contact your representatives and stakeholders and let them know your thoughts. Take advantage of social media, and I like to add, but don't just take advantage of social media. So social media is a very powerful tool. It helps us it allows us to spread information practically like wildfire sometimes. It allows us to share information with people from all over the globe. And so take advantage of social media to share information and to advocate for SDG 5, but don't just do that. I think social media is great, but it should also just, you know, complement other types of advocacy, because sometimes it can feel performative, or it can, you know, just not be the best way to spread information, because as I said previously, infographics are things tools you should be kind of wary about sometimes. And yes, I think you should take advantage of social media, but also consider it like more of a something that complements other types of advocacy and not as a main tool. Think outside of the box, advocate for art. If you attended our opening ceremony, we have with a representative from Slam Out Loud, Ms. Sasha John, talking about their work promoting gender equality through art. And I think that promoting gender equality and, you know, fighting prejudice and other types of injustice and other social issues and global challenges, it is very much possible to and great to advocate for that through art. A lot of songs, a lot of art, a lot of paintings of exhibitions, they have a focus on social on social issues. There are many artists who talk about gender inequality in their work. We have, Taylor Swift has songs about gender inequality. There is a Portuguese sculptor called Joana Vasconcelos who also focuses a lot on gender inequality in her art. And so I think raising awareness through art and advocating through art to kind of, just to raise awareness and make representatives and make waves and make representatives and stakeholders hear and see that people really care about this issue. I think that's very creative, and I think that's a great way to do so. Peer-to-peer advocacy is also great. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, educate them about gender inequality. And if you can, vote. Participating in democracy is a right that a lot of women take for granted, but it is a fairly recent right. In my country, women have only been able to vote since the 70s, I believe, fully. And honestly, I think as women and even the people who aren't women, voting is a great way to promote gender equality and voting with conscience and in people who support gender equality. So tips for advocating: examine your community and adapt. As I said, very nuanced issue. So see what works for your community, see what your community needs, and adapt. Team up. You don't have to advocate by yourself. Join other activists, advocates, and people who want to fight for gender equality in your community and create action and advocate together. Be a good listener. As I said, we need to listen to those who are affected by the issue in different ways than we are. Think critically. As I said 75 times in this presentation, be creative. Always consider intersectionality, that gender equality is an issue that aggravates a lot of other issues. Don't censor yourself in the conversation, particularly when it's not appropriate. There are times where your experience always matters, but there are times where you should, just sit down and listen. Don't censor yourself in the conversation all the time. Be willing to learn. None of us are perfect. None of us are born without any biases, so we need to be willing to learn. Engage with stakeholders. As I said, keep up with organizations in your area, join them for any campaigns they might be holding, and keep in touch with your representatives and just hold them accountable for anything they might do to contribute to gender inequality, and know what you're advocating for. As I said earlier, information is power, and we need to know what you are advocating for and what we are advocating against in order to be good advocates. So yes, thank you very much for coming, and if you have any questions, the time is now. You can raise your arms, drop them in the chat. Okay, so Miss Martin asks, how many of you have done Model UN? You can raise your hands. I have done Model UN. Wait a second, I'm also going to raise my hand. So Aiko and Grunor, who are also volunteers at Mun Impact, have also done MUN. Manasseh has also done MUN. Okay, so I believe that's 5 of us. I think you can lower your hands now if you don't have. And MUN is honestly a great way to learn more about gender inequality. Mun Impact, for instance, holds MUN debates every week at our OMEN program for high school students. I think monthly for our university and middle school students, and we also have our MUN at Home program. And this year, our programs were themed after gender inequality. So our participants researched about the issue of gender inequality, and they debated it for the perspective of our country. So I think that's very interesting and a great engaging way to learn about this issue. Janet, do you have a question? Any other questions? Okay, no worries.
Reed, I put a question out there. I'd just love to hear from people who are their female role models in the world today in the areas of perhaps STEM, the arts, athletics. Anyone care to share that?
Yes, raise your hand if you want to respond or drop that in the chat. I think that's a great question.
We currently at our school have a Black History Month, and a lot of our girls in our program and our female teachers have gotten up and spoken about how inspired they are by some females. One of our dance and language coordinators just got up and spoke about a female artist in the International Theater Company and showed a video of her dancing. It was just remarkable.
Yes, and there are now with the internet and all of that, and even before, there are so many ways to connect with good female role models and people who are, you know, advocating for gender inequality. So I'm going to go first in case everyone's shy to respond. My female role models, I have a lot of them, but mostly I'm very inspired by Taylor Swift and by her fight to own her masters and by her art and everything she has done to combat gender inequality in the music industry since she started over a decade ago. I am also very inspired by activists like Malala, as I added a quote by her to our to the workshop, and Greta Thunberg and all of that. Oh, and Misty Copeland. Yeah, I do ballet, and Misty Copeland is just an amazing dancer and someone who has been breaking so many stereotypes in the industry. And yes, honestly, I'm also very inspired by her. So yes, feel free to share, everyone. Add your responses to the chat, raise your hand, let's have a conversation.
I'd also love to hear from people, as I'm an educator in the United States, and our boys sports get so much more attention in our program, and a lot of the girls are doing extremely well, but there's very little attendance. I wouldn't say no support. They get support financially, but not in terms of student engagement. I'm curious if that's similar in other countries where you all are from in your schools. Such a quiet crowd. There we go. Let's see.
Absolutely.
Anyone? Open up. That's what we're here for. Share. Nothing to be embarrassed about. Get outside your comfort zone. Speak, people, speak. I feel like I need to start calling on people, Rita.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to share my answer first because I dropped it in the chat. But yeah, school sports are not very popular here, but like they are in university, but not so much in high school. I'm not aware of university sports, but in professional sports, definitely yes. So there's that. I'm going to start calling on people for real if you guys want to respond. And I'm going to start with people here I know. So Grunor, Aiko, you guys are our targets, definitely. So feel free to raise your hand and speak a little bit about this. Okay, I'm going to have to start calling on people. Aiko, can you share about this?
I'm so sorry, I left for a second. Can you like tell me who again?
Okay, yeah. The question is, there are two questions. So you can answer one of them or both. So who are your female role models in our world today? And do women in school sports get less support than men in your country?
Like for the sports, I don't know about like the whole country, but in like my school, there are like a lot of clubs that they're boys but not girls. Like we have a soccer club for the boys, and the girls said they want to make one, but we couldn't. So I think some of the
Yeah.
sports are not.
Yeah, definitely. What about in your school, Gernor?
So in my school, it's kind of the same. Boys get more attention than girls, but we are trying to improve it. So I've also given an idea. Maybe we can start a football club for both girls and boys, and it is actually working. And many girls have auditioned for it. Like in my class as well, there are many girls who are going to play cricket now and football now. I'm really happy about that. So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great, and it's great that your school's trying to improve. Okay, I have a question on the chat that is unrelated, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. When we have to submit the sandbox project, so we have we have you know, a sandbox session up next, and you should submit before tomorrow because that's Dolphin Pool. If you can submit that today, then that's great.
I just put a fun photo in there, shot last night with one of our girls shooting a last-minute basket to win the basketball game in against our rival school. And the girls just celebrated, and it was so much fun. But when you look in the student section, there's hardly anyone there to appreciate it except their parents.
The photo looks great, by the way. I don't know if you shot it, but it looks great.
I did. That was mine. And it just really shows that, like, oh my God, her hands up in the air just made the shot. It was so cool.
Matilda, do you have a question?
It was, sorry, I hope this is all right. It was just about like sports at schools and female representation. Is that all right? If I just
go ahead.
Thanks. So this was really strange, actually. This conversation came up with my friends last week. So at my school, I don't know what it's like in the US, we have a head of year. And he's very like, he loves to encourage his students to participate in sports, which is so great. But as soon as he put on his presentation, all the pictures of the successes that the school had had, there was one picture of the women's rugby team, and that was it. And all the others were of boys in my year group. And the girls are never pushed to do anything or never encouraged to try any of the sports. And me and my friends really wanted to try it, but there's not enough of us to join a team or to start a team. And so I was wondering about joining the already existing basketball team, and I was told I can't because I'd be the only girl and it's only for men. And it just felt really, it felt like I was being really excluded for it. And there's a lot of people who I think would really benefit if they were just encouraged, but aren't because it's so focused on the boys.
Oh, Matilda, that is just such a great call for a movement, to lead a movement of people who support you and to stand up to that kind of gender inequality, to stand up to the head and just say, hey, you know what, this is how I felt because of your presentation. And I'm sure there are many others out there. To go to your administration. It's not a fight. It's not an argument. It's just a fact that this is the way things are presented, the imagery, and it's not right. It's just not right to take a leadership role and for a school to actually start making that type of change, because it affects so many girls. It affects so many people of color to watch a presentation and not see themselves in those pictures. So go, Matilda. We stand behind you.
Yes. Take take the lessons you learned from this workshop and speak up. Use your voice to create some impact, make some waves, and create some change. If no one has any other questions, then I think I'll close this workshop and officially end it. And if you have any questions, you can contact me. And if you're interested in engaging with Mun Impact, you can contact me at my email, which I'm dropping in the chat. And I hope to see you at our next session, which is SDG Sandbox, the second session. And if not, I hope to see you tomorrow at our first session, which is our open forum. Thank you. And yes.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you, everyone.
Yes. Bye, everyone.